Hello there and welcome to Planet America's Election 2024 special. Live from the Oval Office, I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Licciardello.
It has been one of the most consequential, controversial and unpredictable elections in American history, between a vice president vying to become the first woman ever elected to the presidency and a twice impeached, criminally convicted former president described by senior staff as a fascist, unfit for office.
And it's been a wild ride, John. Joe Biden was running for a second term at one point in time, and then his age caught up with him on the presidential debate stage back in June. Then Donald Trump was shot at a rally in July, and he came within millimetres of death. And then Kamala Harris was nominated by the Democrats. Bobby Kennedy Jr. was running against both of them, and he decided to drop out. He backed Trump, and now he wants to take fluoride out of the water. It just goes on and on.
Sure does. The polls have gone from what was a close race between Biden and Trump at the start of the year to a big Trump lead after that debate. Then Harris came in. She took the lead, and it's been pretty much on a knife edge ever since, according to the polls, which suggested this could be the closest election ever. So, let's take a look at what's happened. Well, as of this hour, we can tell you that former President Donald Trump has pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in American political history. Fox News was the first to call it.
The Fox News decision desk can now officially project that Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
Senator J.D. Vance will become the 50th vice president of the United States.
Donald Trump is only the second president to be elected to two non-consecutive terms, shrugging off claims that he's completely unfit for office. Democrats aren't conceding that all is lost, not entirely, not yet. Harris campaign co-chair Cedric Richmond did tell supporters, though, gathered at Howard University in Washington, D.C., for what they'd hoped would be a victory celebration, to go home early. Kamala Harris would not be speaking tonight.
We still have votes to count. We still have states that have not been called yet. We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken. So you won't hear from the vice president tonight, but you will hear from her tomorrow. She will be back here tomorrow to address not only the HU family, not only to address her supporters, but to address the nation.
Now, just so you know, that is not typically what a winning campaign says. Hillary Clinton in 2016, John Kerry in 2004, both stayed hunkered down as well until the next day before they conceded defeat. Democrat hopes of a surge in younger and female voters that would put Harris over the top today were dashed as the counting got underway. The mood at Trump's election night celebration in Florida, though, very different to that scene in D.C. Unlike 4 years ago, when at about this time Trump angrily claimed to have won an election he'd just lost, this time he looked every bit the winner.
We're going to make you very proud of your vote. I hope that you're going to be looking back someday and say that was one of the truly important moments of my life when I voted for this group of people beyond the president, this group of great people.
And after the usual expressions of thank yous, he spent some time talking about Elon Musk's rockets and a whole other bunch of stuff.
And it came down so gently, and then it wrapped those arms around it, and it held it, and just like you hold your baby at night, your little baby. And it was a beautiful thing to see, and I called Elon. I said, Elon, was that you? But he's a character, he's a special guy, he's a super genius.
And on it went. Trump is still going to be Trump. We know that much, Chaz. Assuming there is no sudden surprise, Trump will have a Senate majority to help pass any legislation that he can get through the House. The final composition of the House is still to be determined, Chaz. But take us through, because we need 270 Electoral College votes to win the presidency. And on the big board, you've got 267, he's almost there.
That's right. As this is the map as it stands, although having said that, all four of those white states there are about to be red from the looks of things. Let me just take you through those white states and only those white states, just to show every one of these states would put Trump over the edge. First of all, let's have a look there at Michigan. You can see there's a 4-point margin. The reason I'm showing you that is because Hillary Clinton lost Michigan by 0.3%. So then if we go back and have a look at Wisconsin, that's a 4-point margin. I just showed you that, didn't I? Let's look at Michigan then instead. They're both 4-point margins.
So you're going fine.
Live TV is fantastic.
Yeah.
Michigan, Clinton lost by 0.3%. Wisconsin, Clinton lost by 0.7%. That's my point.
Yep.
Let's look at Nevada. That is a 5-point margin, and Clinton won Nevada.
Yeah.
And then we've got Arizona as well, which that's a 2.5-point margin. Now, Clinton lost Arizona by 3.5, so that might be the one area where Kamala Harris did better than Clinton. Otherwise, this is Clinton's map.
Yeah.
It's just worse. Like the margins are bigger. And Clinton won the popular vote by 2%. At the moment, Kamala Harris is 3.8% behind. Now, that's going to close up because California has a lot more votes to come in. I'm not sure it's going to close up to the point where she wins the popular vote. She definitely, I don't think, is going to get 2% ahead of Trump. So you'd have to say Harris has done slightly worse than Clinton did in 2016.
Absolutely. And compared to where Joe Biden was 4 years ago, she's apparently lost the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt as well. This is also significant, Chaz, because the polls were consistently saying that all 7 of these states were within the margin of error. They could have gone either way, but it was assumed that Harris probably had a lock on those 3 industrial Midwestern states, Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin, where she appears to be on track to lose by about 4 percentage points. So like 2020 and 2016, Donald Trump is doing about 4 points better in the vote than he was in the polls. So there is still something wrong with the polls.
Absolutely. We did say repeatedly that while all those states we just talked about and more, the 7 swing states, were all basically ties in the polls. We did say there's a 3-point margin of error.
Yeah.
So it'd be so easy for one of the candidates to win all 7 of them by 2 points or 3 points, and that was on the cards. Now, as it happened, that's exactly what's happened, except for, as you say, it wasn't by 2 or 3 points, it was by 4 or 5 points, at least so far. They might come within the margin of error. But if they don't, then there is another polling error. And by the way, I talked about just then that Harris didn't do as well as Clinton. Credit where credit's due. Donald Trump may have just been the first Republican to win the popular vote in 20 years.
That would be extraordinary. The first time since George W. Bush in 2004. And it's not just the public polls, the media-sponsored polls that can be a little bit questionable, but the data that the campaigns themselves were looking at. Just last night, David Plouffe, who steered Obama to 2 election victories in 2008 and in 2012, he was saying that the Harris campaign was within reach in all 7 states, on a path, he said, to a possible sweep of all 7. So clearly their numbers were also somewhat askew. But let's get a bit of a sense as to what has unfolded over the last few hours. Short time ago, we spoke to Republican strategist Lan He Chen. He's a former advisor on Mitt Romney's presidential campaign in 2012. What just happened, Lan He?
Well, there was always a possibility that this race was going to break actually in the way it did, because a number of these states have experienced similar demographic trends. There are very similar political dynamics at play. So when you look at Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, 3 states that Kamala Harris had to win, it does not appear as we sit here now that she will win those states. I think that very similar dynamics in all 3 of those states. You had Donald Trump able to increase his margins in parts of the state that were more rural. He was able to lose by less in the major urban areas, so Milwaukee, Detroit, and Philadelphia. And he was able to make gains with some constituencies that Republicans traditionally have not done well with. That's blacks, that's Hispanics, and that's union households. So the trends we saw in the Rust Belt states, at least, were fairly evident. In the Sun Belt, it was very different, I think. It was you had a lot of people who were frustrated with the state of the U.S. economy. You had a lot of people who were frustrated with just how things are going in the country. And the expression of that frustration in places like Georgia and North Carolina was a vote for Donald Trump. So I think that this race ended up being an expression of anger at the status quo, anger at Joe Biden, and dissatisfaction in some ways with Kamala Harris and the candidate that she is.
You mentioned the economy there, Lanhee. Looking at the exit polls, 67% of people said the economy was not so good or poor, and they overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. Is that the main issue, do you think?
Yeah, it's the economy. I mean, I think, Chaz, in some of these places, the economy was the top issue. Immigration, sort of migration policy and the issues around the southern border, that was a major issue. But, even amongst voters who said that democracy was the top issue, Donald Trump didn't do so badly, as it turns out. So on all these different dynamics and dimensions, Donald Trump was able to present, I think, an opportunity for people to vote against the status quo. That's really what this was. And I think that it ended up working in his favor, quite significantly.
So, Lanhee, for our viewers who are wondering how a twice impeached, criminally convicted, disgraced election denier who's also been found liable for sexual abuse, how that guy could get elected yet again. What's your answer?
Well, I think there's two things. First of all, I think people's impressions of Donald Trump are fully formed at this point. So each additional piece of information they get about him maybe doesn't add all that much in terms of their impressions. They sort of have a view of him, and it is what it is. The second thing I would say is that there is this issue of people just wanting change. And notwithstanding all of the issues that they may have had with Donald Trump, his history, the things he's done, their desire for change outweighs their assessments of his character. And, I think a lot of people believe that politicians in America are kind of not great anyway. And so in that sense, Donald Trump doesn't represent that much of a deviation from the norm.
And Lanhee, what about the other side? Kamala Harris, did she do anything obviously wrong that you could point out right now? Or from your point of view, as she was just up against it, it wasn't going to be her election?
Well, the environment, the overall environment wasn't great for her. It was a change election. The economy was perceived as poor. She had to deal with a low popularity rating of the incumbent who was tied to her. So in all those ways, the macro environment was going to be tough for her. Are there things she could have done differently? Perhaps, maybe she shouldn't have waited so long to really start interacting with the media. You'll recall that, she spent a long time really not taking a lot of questions or interacting a lot with the media. I think that did affect her standing in some ways. I'd also argue that, she should have picked a different VP nominee. And not that those things matter a whole lot, but if you've got to win Pennsylvania and you've got a perfectly good governor of Pennsylvania who could be your vice presidential nominee, it does strike me as a little strange that you wouldn't pick him for electoral purposes. And I don't know if that would have made a difference in Pennsylvania, but I tend to think that given how small the margin was, it would have meant something. And so there are decisions we can look at, but the overall reality of the environment was this is going to be a very hard election for Democrats to win, whether it was Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. And that was really the headwind she was running into.
Lanhee, what is your anticipation now for a second Trump term? He makes a lot of threats, promises, call it what you will, but he talks about big things like massive tariffs on China and indeed on trading partners like Australia as well. He's talking about mass deportation, maybe 11 million undocumented workers to be banished from the United States. If these things happen, they will have presumably a massive economic and social impact.
Yeah, I would take the tariffs very, very seriously. I think certainly that is an area where he will go to because it's a consistency he's had throughout his career in politics. He's been pro-tariff, and particularly with respect to China and also with other trading partners. Certainly, that's something I would expect. On the domestic front, I'm not sure if he's going to go through with this mass deportation plan. What I do know is that he is someone who has never been afraid to use the federal government and to use federal spending to effectuate policy goals. It's what we might call industrial policy. He has always been favorable toward that. I would fully expect him to be favorable toward that in a second term. And I do think that a lot of the transactional nature of the relationships that he has with global leaders, that will become important again. So the relationship between the U.S. and another country will be driven in no small part by his personal relationship with the leaders of those countries. So that's something certainly to take note of in a region, as Australia is a strategically important region, where some of those relationships are going to be closely examined.
And one more from the exit polls, Lanhee. It seems like, in the end, despite all the gender talk, that women's vote and men's vote didn't actually change very much at all. Black people's vote didn't change very much at all, but there was a massive change in the Latino vote. Is there a realignment happening in America between the parties and Latino voters?
This is the million-dollar question, and I think some of this will need some time to sort out. I'm not convinced that the influence of this goes beyond Trump. I think this might be a phenomenon that's unique to him. We'll see. When we get to the midterm elections in 2026, we'll see how Republicans do. If they continue to do well with Hispanic voters and to a certain degree, Black men particularly, I'm just not convinced that the effect really extends beyond Trump. He really is a one-of-a-kind politician. And, regardless of how you feel about him, I think you have to look at the political talent that he's had to win now twice the presidency of the United States, and to do it in a way that I think a lot of people continue to count him out. And the reality is that he's able to defy the odds over and over again.
Lanhee Chen, great to get your thoughts tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, as of this hour, Chaz, the results are fairly clear to see. Donald Trump on the verge of a historic second term in office. We don't yet know why it has happened exactly. Exit polls give us a certain amount of information in that direction. It's 20 years ago since I was sitting in a bar in Boston on election night covering the John Kerry campaign, just to stay out of the cold, you understand.
Sure.
And the early exit polls came out and it said that Kerry was going to win Florida, he was going to win Ohio, he was going to be president. In Copley Plaza, Bob Shrum, his campaign manager, was saying to Senator Kerry, Mr. President-elect, congratulations. They believe the exit polls as well. We all learned a lesson that night because he didn't win Florida and he didn't win Ohio and he didn't win the presidency. But they can give us some important information. What are they telling you tonight? Yeah,
you're right. Exit poll numbers aren't perfect. These are adjusted exit poll numbers, though, as opposed to the John Kerry ones, the early ones. They do change over time. And look, these will get refined even further. But broadly speaking, they do point us to some interesting developments. First of all, let's talk about the dogs that didn't bark in this election. We spoke endlessly on this show about how gendered this election was, how we're expecting a massive gender gap. Let's look at the women's vote, though. They went from supporting Democrats 57 to 42 in 2020. They support Democrats 54 to 44 this year. A 15-point gap became a 10-point gap. It shrank, and women were actually more Republican this time round. As for men, they went from supporting Republicans 53-45 in 2020 to supporting Republicans 54 to 44 in this election, as in there was no real difference. Dog didn't bark. What about the black vote? Another silent dog. We were told that black votes were moving towards Trump, especially black men, but the exit polls did not generally back that up. Black men went from supporting Democrats 79 to 19 in 2020 to supporting Democrats 78 to 20 this year. No change. Black women went from supporting Democrats 90 to 9 in 2020 to supporting Democrats 92 to 7 this year. Basically, the black vote didn't change. By contrast, when it came to Latino men, there was a massive change. From 36% supporting Republicans in 2020 to 53% supporting Republicans this year. And as for Latino women, they went from 30% supporting Republicans in 2020 to 37% supporting Republicans this year. That is where all the action was. A huge change. Another interesting development was in the most important issue of this election. We were talking about abortion. We were talking about the economy. No, democracy, with 34% saying that was the most important issue. But here's the real surprise. Despite Democrats pushing this issue endlessly for the last 2-3 weeks, out of the 73% who said democracy was threatened, they supported Republicans 50 to 49. In some states, like Pennsylvania, Republicans led there by even more. But don't let me make you think that the economy didn't matter, because this polling was also very clear there. 32% thought the economy was excellent or good, and they supported the Democrats by a mile, 91-8. Have a look at that. But out of the 67% who said the economy was not so good or poor, 67% is a big number, Republicans led there 69-29. That's where the election was lost. Another interesting nugget. We've also asked who the famous double haters would favour, because those politicians usually win elections, the ones who win the vote are the people who don't like either of them. Well, even though Harris won the favourability contest, 46-42, out of those who like neither of them, neither Harris nor Trump, that was 8% of the electorate, the Republicans won 55-32, which would have helped Trump out there. Finally, John, some state observations. In Michigan, there was a Gaza factor. We did speculate about that, if it was coming. We spoke about how the youth might not have been enamoured with the Democrats' leadership in Gaza. In Michigan, the youth vote went from 37% to Republicans in 2020 to 51% of the youth vote going to Republicans in Michigan this year. And it was only in Michigan that happened. Finally, in Pennsylvania, we wondered if all those Pennsylvania Puerto Ricans would object to Puerto Rico being called rubbish in a joke during the Madison Square Garden rally. Not so much. In fact, in Pennsylvania, Latinos went from 27% of them supporting Republicans to 41% of them supporting Republicans, and those Pennsylvania Latinos are mostly Puerto Ricans. So no problems there, for the Republicans at least. By contrast, the one place the black vote did seem to be affected was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where black women went from 4% supporting Republicans to 94% supporting Democrats in 2020, to 2% supporting Republicans and 98% supporting Democrats this year. So Democrats went better with black women in Pennsylvania. But for black men, they went from 10% supporting Republicans in 2020 to 24% supporting Republicans this year. That is a big jump. That's the only place where the black vote changed a lot.
Yeah, fascinating to see the areas where there was very, very little change from election to election, despite all the talk, and then these massive changes that seem counterintuitive. The Latino vote, given what was said by Trump supporters about Puerto Rico, given the threat to deport 11 million, mostly Latinos from the United States, but clearly Latinos who are in America, legally, living there long-term with voting rights, say, well, that's not us. In fact, maybe they give us a bad name. So be gone with them. It's a fascinating outcome, and also potentially further cements the sort of seismic shift that Donald Trump has brought in the coalitions that form the Democratic and Republican parties, because this is no longer the Republican Party of George W. Bush or Mitt Romney.
It certainly is not. And look, like I said, these figures will be refined, but just things like the Latino vote, that's not an accident.
Yeah.
Like that, we'll be talking about that for the next 4 years. I think.
Let's talk about it a bit now as well, because it was back on election night in 2020 that we spoke to Joe Biden's then pollster, Celinda Lake. She's an expert on both Latino and female voting patterns. 4 years ago, she correctly predicted Biden's path to victory, 4 days before they were officially called. When we spoke to Celinda again a little earlier today, she was a lot less confident, it's fair to say, but still not quite giving up.
There has certainly been a surge Trump vote, and he's doing better with Latino men and some groups than we had hoped. And we're also seeing really solid support among unmarried women, college-educated women. So it's making black women, it's making a very, very tight race.
Celinda, I know exit polls aren't super accurate, even adjusted exit polls, and I know that they are going to continue to change. But having said that, when you look at the exit polls as they exist at the moment, is it possible that the partisan gap amongst women voters could have gotten smaller since 2020? Because it appears to be going from 57-42 to 54-44. Is that possible?
It's possible because it was tightening at the end. It seems unlikely. It's confusing. And the exits usually have too many college-educated women, but that should have made the gap bigger. So the early exits are confusing, as you identified. I think what's going on that is clearer is there is a gender chasm between non-college educated men and college educated women. Non-college educated men being the most Republican voters, college educated women being the most Democratic. That's clear. It's also clear that there's been continued erosion in rural America and exurban America, and it's unclear if the pickup in the suburbs and urban America has compensated enough for that.
Celinda, what can you tell us about what the expectations were from those who were seeing the deep data that campaigns get as to how this election was going to play out? And has it followed that script, or has it varied greatly to the extent that the future is unknowable now?
Oh, really good question. So I think that it was always too close to call in the data, and both campaigns were saying that. Well, I mean, Trump claimed he won, but the analytics of both campaigns, and you definitely had everyone confused about what the turnout model would actually be. And we knew it was going to be very high turnout. Was there going to be a Trump surge? Was there going to be a Harris surge? Was there going to be both? So the analytics, I think, were a bit unclear. I don't think it was as clear as it has been in the past. And then, you know, the pollsters are still struggling with the turnout models. We predicted correctly that Biden was going to win. The margin did narrow in the actual results in the end. And we have this real disconnect between the electoral college vote and the popular vote. So, but I think the biggest thing that the polls are falling short on is really being able to predict who will turn out to vote. And the private polls have compensated for this by running multiple turnout models. Like, we no longer say to our clients, you're going to get this vote. We say, if it's this turnout, you'll get this vote. If it's this turnout, you'll get this vote. But the public polls, of course, don't do that.
So in the last 3-4 weeks, Kamala Harris seemed to work very hard to try and peel off that couple of percent of Nikki Haley Republicans. Do you have any sense whether that strategy paid off at all?
It's unclear whether that strategy paid off at all. Part of the reason that it's hard to figure out is a lot of those moderate Republican women no longer identify as Republicans. They identify as independents. And so that's hard to measure. I would say that the second piece of the strategy was to try to peel off more of Latino men because of the Puerto Rican comments, et cetera. And that does not seem to have been successful. So that strategy, I think, was not successful. What happened with Republican women and women in general, I think is a little unclear right now, frankly.
For Democrats who are thinking, how on earth can we lose to a criminally convicted, twice impeached, disgraced former president, described as a fascist by his 2 top aides from his first term in office? They're also going to be wondering right now, is this Joe Biden's fault because he left it too late to get out? Is it Kamala Harris's fault for focusing on the wrong things? What do you think the answer to those complaints will be?
I actually think it raises a more fundamental question, and I think it's a question that the Democrats have been facing for 20 years. We have got to get a better economic message. We cannot be in a situation where we continue to lose blue-collar voters, we lose poor people, because we do not have an economic conversation that they think will benefit their lives. And in focus groups that we've been doing, I cannot tell you the number of people that say, I know he's a racist, I know he's a sexist, I know he's insane, but I think I will do better economically underneath him, or maybe I'll have a shot. That situation cannot continue. So I think the really fundamental question that it raises for the Democrats is a question that's been on the table for 20 years, which is, we have to have an economic program that will benefit working people. And we will not be a majority party until we do that.
Well, Celinda Lake, as always, we really appreciate your expertise. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the next president isn't the only thing being decided on this election. Voters in most states will also get the chance to decide the fate of dozens of ballot measures on topics as diverse as abortion, election laws and drug legalisation. Here's Melina Wicks with so much more.
Today, voters across 41 states had their say on 146 statewide ballot measures. Because in a country like America, you can never have too much democracy. The biggest issue this cycle is abortion, with 10 states voting on whether to enshrine abortion rights in their constitution, the most on record for a single year. Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, 6 states have already voted on the issue, with the side in favour of abortion access winning every time. Which is probably not what politicians envisaged when they spent decades fighting over whether to send it back to the states. Also on the ballot in 8 states was a proposed ban on non-citizens voting, which is odd because in literally every one of those states it's already illegal for non-citizens to vote. So why do they need a constitutional amendment to ban it some more? A cynic would say they don't, and it's more about promoting the idea that there's widespread illegal voting. But don't worry, the North Carolina Senate leader has a really good explanation.
You can make a legalistic argument that something like that is already prohibited. However, I do think that I don't see any harm in including that as a constitutional amendment.
North Carolina Constitutional Amendment 2024. Pointless but harmless. And it wouldn't be an election year in the US without ballot initiatives about drugs. North Dakota, South Dakota, and Florida voted on whether to legalize recreational marijuana. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was not happy about it.
You will be able to, bring 20 joints to an elementary school? Is that really going to be good for the state of Florida?
I don't know about the state of Florida, but it would have made the school play more interesting. And while some states are still deciding whether to legalize weed, Oregon voters are being asked to unionize it. Meanwhile, in Massachusetts, they voted on whether to become the 3rd state to legalize natural psychedelic substances like mushrooms, which means for Boston residents, the Red Sox mascot might be about to get even freakier. Then there are some initiatives that are very state-specific, like in Colorado, where they voted on whether to prohibit trophy hunting or shooting at a mountain lion, bobcat, or lynx. Maine is deciding whether to replace their state flag, which currently has its own name written on it like a child's jacket, with this one, which is objectively fine. RIP to these actual rejected entries. Chuck Norris isn't even from Maine. And finally, in Arizona and North Dakota, they had ballot initiatives to try and make it harder to have future ballot initiatives. So I guess for some people, there is such a thing as too much democracy.
Thank you, Melina. Just to update you folks, the latest from some of those ballot proposals that Melina just mentioned. First, those abortion amendments. People voted in favour of abortion rights in Arizona, Colorado, Maryland, New York and Nevada, all with more than 60% of the vote. Abortion rights also got up in the very red states of Missouri and Montana. While 57% of voters did support abortion rights in Florida, they obviously did not clear the 60% threshold required in Florida for victory. South Dakota was the only state to vote no to abortion rights with 37%. Nebraska had 2 abortion ballot measures, one that would limit access to the first trimester and another that would expand access to the point of viability. They contradict each other and they might have caused some confusion because with 80% of the vote counted, Nebraska seems to have voted for both of them. Go figure. Those 8 states that Melina mentioned that voted about the non-citizens from voting amendments, they voted to ban the non-citizens from voting. Idaho, Iowa, Kentucky, Missouri, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina and Wisconsin. Well done, folks. You really showed those non-voting non-citizens. And 3 states voted against weed legalization: North Dakota, South Dakota, and Florida. And Massachusetts. Sorry, mascot. No psychedelics either. Finally, for those who are sick of America's ridiculous electoral system, 4 states actually had the choice of voting for a preferential voting system like ours, well, kind of like ours, and all 4. Colorado, Idaho, Nevada and Oregon voted no. America, you're slow learners.
Hey kids, it's time to learn the fake ABCs. fake anchors, fake ballots, fake cameras, fake debate.
EFG.
Fake economy. The FBI crime statistics are fake. Fake woke generals.
HIJK.
Maggie Haberman, she's fake. Fake infrastructure, fake jobs. Kamala, who is fake.
LMNOP.
It's fake lawsuits, fake media, fake news, fake out, the fake polls.
QRS. TUV.
Quotes from some of the fake news, fake reports, fake stuff, fake Tapper. Unfortunately, fake news, fake votes,
W.
fake writers.
X, Y, and Z.
Everything is fake.
Next time, won't you sing with me?
Don't we love that term, fake? What we've learned about fake over the last little while.
You are watching Planet America's 2024 election special live from the fake Oval Office. Donald Trump has staged an astonishing political comeback today. America's 45th president, all but certain now to become its 47th. Fox News was the first to call the race a couple of hours ago. Official results, though, could still be days away. Kamala Harris has not formally conceded, but the result seems beyond doubt. Certainly, President Trump is in no doubt.
We're going to do the best job. We're going to turn it around. It's got to be turned around. It's got to be turned around fast. And we're going to turn it around. We're going to do it in every way, with so many ways, but we're going to do it in every way. This will forever be remembered as the day the American people regained control of their country.
Democrat hopes that Kamala Harris could reassemble the multiracial, youthful coalition formed by Barack Obama in 2008, or indeed even the older, whiter coalition that elected Joe Biden 4 years ago, were dashed. Instead, tonight, it looks a lot more like 2016. A female candidate still unable to break through the highest glass ceiling. That despite widespread outrage at a conservative Supreme Court stripping away women's reproductive rights across America. Instead, an anti-immigration populist message that frequently veered into outright racism from the most unconventional presidential candidate in history has won the day, or almost certainly has won the day, Chaz.
Yeah, no, he's won the day.
3 points away on the Electoral College count there,
Yeah.
but there's very good reason for confidence now for Trump and the Republicans.
Yeah, look, you might as well paint all those white states red. In fact, you might as well paint the whole map red. This is this is Trump's time for the next 2 years at least, maybe 4.
Yeah, indeed so. So what can we expect from a second Trump presidency? That's the question we put a little earlier to one of Trump's former advisors, Sam Nunberg.
This is going to be a unique time. You know, he is essentially, it is his second term. Despite what he may want, he can't run for another term. So, as every other president in their second term, he has around a year or so to pass the domestic agenda, and it very well may be have the Democrats control the House. It's looking better for Republicans now, but it's still highly competitive, and it's probably improbable that they'll be able to keep the House while they have the Senate. I think that what he is going to attack are foreign policy. Obviously, he's going to look into some kind of negotiation, trying to end the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And he's also, I know for a fact, has told Netanyahu that he really wants to continue to expand the Abraham Accords and get the deal passed with Saudi Arabia. So I don't know what that does in Israel, because you'll have to have some kind of issue, some kind of statement or something, let's say, on the Palestinians. Now, domestically, it's going to be interesting what he's going to do on the agenda there. I'm sure it's going to be a tax plan. His tax plan expires. The one that he passed in 2017, it expires next year in 2025. So there's going to be a lot of negotiation about that. I think that that'll be his big ticket item domestically. I can't see anything, obviously, in like education or something like that. So it's going to be the closest thing to a budget, even though we don't actually pass budgets anymore, our federal government. They're actually continuing resolutions. And then obviously there's going to be a lot of executive orders that he will sign on day one, the same way Joe Biden did and the same way Trump did in 2017, and I think that he will look to fire a lot of the bureaucracy. I think that he will look to do something there. But what I would really say is you're going to see a focus on foreign policy, and particularly vis-a-vis Australia. It's going to be I think he's going to be extremely tough on China. And I would look for him to continue to strengthen the Australian-U.S. alliance, therefore, as well.
So Sam Nunberg there, Chaz, talking about a focus on foreign policy in a second Trump administration. The assumption really is now that funding for the Ukrainian war effort against Russia is going to come to a rather sudden halt. Certainly that'll be the case if there is a Republican majority in both the House as well as the Senate. The Senate not in doubt right now at all, overwhelmingly to the Republicans, and the House is looking pretty strong for them as well now.
Absolutely. Let's start with the Senate. As you say, I think right now we can count at least 52 seats for Republicans. They've won Ohio, West Virginia and Montana from the looks of things. But they're also ahead by 2 in Wisconsin, by 5 in Michigan, by 1 in Pennsylvania and by 1 in Nevada. They're certainly not going to win all of them. They might win none of them. But they could potentially win anything between 52 and 56 seats. Now, that number is important. You might be thinking, oh, who cares? 52, 56, it's a majority. But let me tell you why it's important. Now, number one, there are 2 moderates amongst the Republicans, in Susan Collins and also Murkowski. And so if you get 53, or 52 is actually enough to overpower them already anyway, because J.D. Vance is the tiebreaker. But on top of that, if you looking ahead to 2026, I can't believe we're already talking about 2026.
Sure.
If you look at the map coming up for the opportunities for Democrats to pinch seats from Republicans in the next election, there's really only 3 gettable seats. That's Joni Ernst in Iowa, Susan Collins in Maine, and Tom Tillis in North Carolina. None of them are easy, but they're in a positive election for Democrats, and usually the party out of power wins in the midterms.
Yes.
There are a pretty good chance of those 3, a reasonable chance.
Yeah, and we don't yet know if Susan Collins is even going to run again, and that might be the biggest chance for a Democrat pickup there.
Totally. But my point is, if the Republicans win 1 more seat than they've already got, they are beyond the Democrats winning a majority of the Senate in 2026, which means Trump then potentially has 4 years with a Senate and with a House. Because when we go to the House, he's looking pretty good as well. At the moment, Republicans are ahead 195 to 173, according to the New York Times. They're trying to hit 218, but looking at the seats to come, I think Republicans will get there comfortably. And you'd expect that because often the House reflects the presidency, except for slightly more so in this case because there are a bunch of never-Trumpers who wouldn't vote for Trump as president but would vote Republican in the House. So I think they're going to get a reasonable majority there. And once again, it's important for them to pad the majority because, as we all know, they're kind of like a bunch of cats, a bunch of crazy cats in a plastic bag. And there's Republicans. So you want to have a margin of 10 or 15 to be able to pass things.
And it takes the heat off Donald Trump as well, because with a Republican majority in both the House and the Senate, they have a majority on every committee that the House and Senate forms that have oversight of the presidency. So the House and Senate Judiciary Committees, for example, or the House and Senate Intelligence Committees that might like to investigate Donald Trump and Russian election interference in 2024, for example, or look at any number of things that might come along. They're not going to have the numbers to do that. So as a result, we should not expect Donald Trump to be impeached 2 more times in this term.
Definitely
if that's how it pans out.
And the other thing about the Senate in particular is this then is going to give Donald Trump the opportunity to have a little word to the 2 oldest Supreme Court justices, Alito and Thomas. Alito has already hinted that he's going to retire. When his wife didn't know that she was on camera, she basically said he's going to retire as soon as he can. So he's pretty much gone. And if Thomas goes as well, that means the youngest Supreme Court justice who is conservative or appointed by a Republican would be Roberts, who is turning 73 in 2028. So what that means is that and they've got 2-seat majority, mind you. The next oldest is Gorsuch, who's like in his 50s still. So basically that means after this election, the Republicans are going to hold the Supreme Court for 20 years.
There is going to be a Conservative majority for a generation. There is no doubt about that. There are a lot of other implications that we will have plenty of time over the weeks, months, indeed years ahead to contemplate.
Yeah. Now, look, it's no surprise that running for president costs a huge amount of money, though, and the 2024 election cycle would have to be the most expensive in America's history. So, just how expensive are we talking there? Melina Wicks explains all in the briefing room.
How much does a US election cost? If you have to ask, you can't afford it. Across the presidential, Senate and House races, the total cost is projected to be $15.9 billion. And in the presidential race, $1 billion has been raised by the Harris campaign alone. Plus, there's another $500 million of outside money raised by super PACs, which are organizations that exist for the sole purpose of getting around campaign contribution limits. Harris's campaign has more money than the country of Samoa, which incidentally is a lovely place to hide out if you end up spending $1 billion to lose an election. The Trump campaign has struggled to keep up, raising around $380 million, although outside money is going a long way to fill the gap. Maybe Trump would be getting more donations if he wasn't also asking his supporters to pay for $500 sneakers, and $200 perfume, and $99 digital trading cards.
These cards show me dancing and even me holding some bitcoins.
I don't think he knows what bitcoins are. So where does all this campaign cash come from? You won't be shocked to learn it's rich people. But more surprising is just how much of it comes from so few people. The top 1% of donors account for 50% of all money raised. And for both sides, big money has led to big spending, mostly on ads. From Super Tuesday to mid-October, Harris and Trump ads have aired 904,000 times. And if you live in a swing state, you've noticed.
I'm not making this up when I tell you that every single ad, every single day, on every single channel is about the presidential election. I've not seen an ad for a car or cereal or anything else in weeks.
Cereal ads have been displaced by election ads, and they are somehow even less healthy. Political campaigns have to run a lot of ads, because according to at least one study, nobody knows which political ads work and why. That might seem like an enormous waste of money, but it's worth it, so that everyday people can feel informed about the candidates and enthusiastic about voting.
Well, I don't think they're really talking about issues that matter. It's just like, you know, she's an idiot, he's an idiot. I'm so sick of it. I'm ready for the election to be over.
It's wearing me out.
I don't need any more advice.
It's a waste of money, to be honest. Every time one comes on, I'm like, oh, there goes a lot of money.
There goes a lot of money. That's one campaign slogan we can all agree on.
Thank you, Melina. John, all the money in the world made no difference for Kamala Harris, seemingly.
Yeah.
At least I hope for her sake.
It could have been a lot worse without $1 billion, I guess, but that right now does seem as though it's about the poorest spend of $1 billion since Mike Bloomberg won a couple of delegates in American Samoa in the 2020 primaries.
Yeah. She literally had triple what Donald Trump had.
Yeah, so it tells you that at some point, if the message isn't right or the messenger isn't right or the conditions in the country are not right, no number of paid commercials or door knockers or superior ground games to get out the vote if the voters are not there and receptive. The question now, of course, is going to be asked as Democrats look at the course between now and 2028, which will be here before we know it. Was it something fundamentally wrong with Kamala Harris as a candidate? Was it a poisoned chalice that she was handed by Joe Biden? There will be recriminations. There will be a lot of very wealthy donors saying, what did you do with all my money? And a lot of Democrats who are going to be heartbroken that yet again, they're on the verge of making history with a woman of colour to become President of the United States, and it's been snatched away like Lucy in the football.
I think we've spoken about this beforehand, that 28% of people saying the country's on the right track. That's a steep hill to climb. And I reckon if Joe Biden had been in her position, he would have gotten torched. I think that I think Kamala, it's going to be very fashionable to kick Kamala Harris over the next few months and years. I think she did a pretty good job. I mean, look, I objected to her media strategy all along, as you know. I never liked the way she did interviews, but I don't think that's the reason why she lost. I think that the American people were not happy with this administration, and she was carrying the can for them.
Astonishingly, though, by every measure other than immigration and one poor jobs report last week, which had only 12,000 jobs created in a month, way below expectations of about 150,000. But apart from that, by every other measure, wages are up. People's 401k superannuation accounts, way up. The stock market, booming. Industry, booming. Infrastructure, booming. The American economy is rightly described as the strongest, if not the strongest, one of the strongest in the world, except that every time Americans go to the store, they're paying 20+% more for a basket of goods.
Yeah.
This is inflation. For the first time in 30 years, Americans are seeing just how little their money buys at the shops. They've forgotten what it's like.
Absolutely, and I know there's going to be a lot of frustrated Democrats out there who are going to look at the polls, and in a month's time, they're going to notice that the polls have people having huge confidence in the economy, and they're going to go, oh, come on, it hasn't changed. What is going on? And they'll be annoyed. But, you know, part of it is selling.
Right.
That's something Trump is good at, and something that Joe Biden was terrible at.
Well, it's something that you have to, even though he's often selling snake oil, Trump is brilliant at it. Selling an idea that things were better under him. He was the one that brought the worst economic collapse since the Great Depression of the 1930s and failed to respond adequately to a global pandemic and sat on it for 7 weeks, hoping it would go away, causing, by some estimates, an additional 300,000 deaths. And yet, he became the good old days.
Yeah.
He became we're not going back. Oh, yes, we are. Can't get there fast enough.
And I know that when we say things like that, people can go, but that's so superficial, who cares? I'm sorry, if you're a politician, that's part of your job. You need to be able to sell it. And the fact that Joe Biden used to be a great salesman. This is part of why he was too old, because he lost the ability to sell. And that's part of why he should have stepped down earlier, because he was a sitting duck because he couldn't sell his own administration. Anyway, well, there'll be recriminations forever. I don't blame Kamala Harris.
Tell me this, if Joe Biden had dropped out at the end of last year, allowed for a competitive primary, would, 1, Kamala Harris have been the Democratic nominee, and 2, would she have won today?
I think that from what we saw when she first took over, if the same thing happened 18 months ago, I think she probably would have been a successful president for a little bit of time there, and then they would have had the primary. I think there's a reasonable chance she might have won.
Do you think she runs in 4 years? Because she'll start off as the favourite, just as Al Gore did heading into 2004.
Nah, she's done. There are about 5 very talented youngsters in the Democratic Party who are coming through, and I bet there's going to be more in 2026. She's had her dash. I think, we'll be talking about Shapiro, we'll be talking about Wes Moore, we'll be talking about...
Pete Buttigieg was the big winner on the night.
Yeah, we're talking about all of them. I think she's had her dash. But we'll see. Who knows?
Indeed.
Now, when you spend way too much time studying clips of American politics like we do, sometimes you make amusing but extremely trivial observations. And our writer, Scott Abbott, is one of the keenest observers of amusing but extremely trivial things. Now, Scott found a beauty that I'm not sure anyone else on Earth has noticed. So seeing as Tim Walz is now well on his way to becoming a trivia question, we thought we'd take advantage of this last chance opening to share Scott's observation with you all. Enjoy.
Coming soon, Tim Walz and the Scratching Your Ear Tour of America.
Wow. Thank you, Philadelphia. Wow. Hello, LeClaire. Well, hello, Reno. Well, thank you, Erie. Well, thank you, RAC. Hello, Michigan. It is good to be here. Well, hello, Nebraska. Wow, hello, Atlanta. Good afternoon, Durham. Hello, Los Angeles. Hello, Window Rock. Good morning, Manitowoc. Hello, neighbor. Hello, Madison. Wow.
Don't miss Tim Walz, because this election is a real head-scratcher.
Hello, North Carolina.
Poor Scott, hundreds of hours went into that.
Poor Tim Walls as well. So 4 years ago, Chaz, we were sitting here with a strange situation where Donald Trump had claimed victory. We knew that the votes were out there to give Joe Biden the victory. We then saw what happened. Trump still refuses to accept that he lost that election. He didn't turn up at the inauguration. Now it appears as though he has won. It's cut and dried. There will be an orderly transition. There will not be violence. There won't be an attempt to overthrow the election. There will be an inauguration on the 20th of January. Joe Biden will be there. Kamala Harris will be there. Donald Trump will be there. JD Vance will be there. It will suddenly seem normal again. Big question in my mind tonight is, do we then see a more normal Trump presidency? Is he better at it the second time, less chaotic? Has he got the right people around him, ones that he's not going to be firing by tweet? Or is that hoping too much, that Donald Trump will have somehow mellowed? He may have exercised some of the demons that have driven him to make untold billions and to seek the highest political office in the world. Because, frankly, he was not good at being president the first time. This is his last shot. The clock is ticking. He's 78 years old. Can he do it?
There's only so many things he wants to do. Like he wants to pass tariffs. He wants to deport a bunch of illegal immigrants. I'm not sure he wants much else. I think he just enjoys being president. He wants to not be going to jail. By the way, that's something we should mention. The fact that the one thing you can be sure of after tonight is that those charges are disappearing, those federal charges. Right, so that's what he wants.
He's got sentencing on state charges in a couple of weeks.
Sure.
That's going to be interesting.
That will be interesting. But yeah, he's I don't think he necessarily cares whether he is what we would call a conventional orthodox kind of president. He just wants to do those tariffs and the deportations. Now, I think the tariffs are going to happen. I agree with Lan He-chen, what he said before. I think the tariffs are going to happen, and I think the deportations won't happen.
Yeah.
But
I think a few deportations will happen, but it'll be like the border wall.
Yeah.
It'll get about a quarter done, and he's going to then find a way to bring them back in straight away on work visas.
Yeah, there'll be some show raids for sure. For sure.
Right.
But yeah, I think the question is about how much America changes over the next 4 years. And the one thing which I would say is the filibuster may be on its way out, because if you've got 53 or 52 senators and you want to get stuff done, you've got your House, you've got them for 4 years that you think you got them for 4 years, and the filibuster is the only thing standing in your way, that might disappear.
Yep. We'll see. We're going to be back next year to cover all the fun, but that's it for this live election night trip to Planet America. We'll be back again 9:30 p.m. on ABC TV next Wednesday, and
we have a Fireside Show on ABC News and Friday night at ABC 8 p.m. Eastern, and both shows are on ABC iView, YouTube and Facebook, and celebrations for President Trump. Roll the fire. See you later. Tried to burn the studio down. Oh God, it's too late. See you guys.
With new owners, this home is getting a grand makeover.
Why not just demolish the whole lot? Well, we made a promise to the previous owners, but with a couple of twists.
Including a giant shipping container on full display.
It's unapologetic.
The neighbours, what are they saying?
I hid from them for a while.
I think the original homeowners wouldn't recognise the place.
It's going to look a lot worse before it looks a lot better.
No pressure.
Grand Designs Australia.